Great to see you all here. Obviously, y'all can hear us. Let's go ahead and dive in and not waste any time. My name is Chris Tuttle. I work with nonprofits around the world doing digital strategy development and implementation, providing consulting, support management services, including web, email, social media support, and a lot of training, including webinars like this. I've been, one of the reasons Seth and I talked about doing this session together is we both work remote mostly and with remote teams. And for me, it's been about 5 years total that I've been working remote, both from home and various remote offices or while traveling. And in this past year, as I've been developing my new agency, Tuttle Co., I've been hiring team members and staff who don't necessarily live in New York City and definitely don't work in an office with me. And so I've been learning myself this past year how to manage teams and work remotely.
And I'm Seth Giammanco. I am a principal and technology lead at Minds on Design Lab, or MOD for short. We're a design studio that works with nonprofits, foundations, and social good companies to help extend and activate their brands across print and web. My area of expertise is on the web side and the digital side. I shape a lot of web solutions, from simple communication websites to more elaborate web applications. And Mod Lab has been in operation since 2007. We've always had a home base in Brooklyn, New York, with myself and our founder, Michelle Perro, who's our creative lead. But during that time, we've managed a remote team from the start. So whether sometimes contractors, sometimes full or part-time employees at various points in our history. Currently, we have about 6 contractors that are working with us on a weekly basis of various skills that are contributing to our team and our team work, all remote and all in different parts of the country and different time zones as well.
Awesome. So to recap a little bit about what we're going to go over today, we're going to talk really quickly just about kind of what we know around what's happening in the world today. Obviously, this is affecting everybody a bit differently, but there's also some similarities across countries, even around the world, of how user behavior is changing and how people are reacting, responding, and even feeling today. And so just to get us all on the same page about some of that data, which could also help us understand how our staff and coworkers and partners are probably feeling, we're going to go over some of that information for you here. Just to note, when we talk through this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each data point or slide, but I do source everything that I reference. So if you want to learn more and see the research or the report or the article that I'm mentioning, you're going to get a recording of this presentation as well as a link to the slides with links to all of those sources. We'll talk about some of the challenges of our new remote world and provide some tips and tools that Seth and I find useful in working remote and really managing teams remotely. So a little bit of real quickly just about where we're at. So let's talk about what we know and what we don't know. And none of this is meant to be alarmist, it's just facts. And just trying to take this in as thinking through how this might affect both our constituents, the work we do, but of course our teammates when we're trying to work with teams remotely. So first of all, change is not new, but we are seeing the highest unemployment in US history, at least. We're seeing the percentage of people who work from home, the greatest ever, or who are trying to work from home. We'll talk a little bit about that. And we've seen the largest drop in the stock market. And so we're definitely feeling the financial or economic changes right now, especially here in the United States. And of course, many other countries around the world are dealing with similar things. Worries are high. And so some studies that have already been done across the world are finding that universally in different countries, we're finding that people are feeling many of the same things. Folks are concerned about their own health, but their family members' health, their country's economic stability, their job situations, and their own ability to keep on throughout this process. We also know that our lives are changing because of our need to distance physically and often work from home. And so because of that, we're seeing that behaviors are changing. And so similarly, around the world, many people are doing things a little bit differently, traveling less, shopping more online, having things delivered. Whether our cities, states, countries have required us to or are highly suggesting us to, these behaviors are happening. It also, how we interact online is also changing. So we all know by now, you probably have seen some kind of news that more people are online now as all of us are sheltering in place. And that is true. However, what we're doing online is not exactly the same. And so we're actually seeing gaming usage increase drastically, mobile usage is increasing, tablet usage is increasing. We've actually seen some desktop usage decreasing slightly. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. And so we don't want to put too much into this, but it's just a note that everyone's at home now, but not everybody is at home doing the same thing on their laptop, working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Things have changed. We also know that internet usage is drastically increasing, including usage of online conferencing tools like this, using Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And so some data here just showing how individual usage, or the blue bars, is up. So those individual connections of people with accounts hosting these kind of webinars or other types of video meetings. But also the data usage, which is the yellow lines, is also up. And that data usage is largely because of multiple people who are online now on video at the same time. So not all just watching one person, but all talking to each other. So some things have not changed. 10% of the US, at least, and of course other countries are different, but 10% of the US has not had internet before this all happened, either because they don't have home internet already, or they don't use home internet for one reason or another. That hasn't changed. 10% of our US population still today, while now being forced to work from home or trying to survive at home, do not have internet. Nonprofits haven't prioritized tech in the past, and unfortunately, this is being seen and felt already today. Organizations that have been better at prioritizing tech improvements over the last decade have been able to respond better in this moment. And constituents still want to hear from us. This hasn't changed. And this is actually probably my favorite piece of research that I found in everything I've been studying this last month. This is some branding research that was done in January in China during the first few weeks of the epidemic growing there and sheltering in place rules being put in place. And in those first few weeks, which are pretty much in line with where we're at now in about week 3 or 2, 3, or 4, depending on where you are in the US with our sheltering rules, we found that less than 4% of people who were surveyed said they wanted brands to stop advertising. Only 4%. People still wanted to hear from brands. They still wanted to see brand advertising. And we'll talk about what they wanted to see in a second. So I want to go over a couple things we don't know. We don't know the long-term economic impact of this, how quickly we'll be able to rebound, and what that effect will be for nonprofit or charity giving. We don't know the long-term physical distancing rules or guidelines that are going to be put in place. And we don't know exactly what this whole shift of trying to work at home during a crisis is going to do to our productivity, to our personnel's mental health, and to our ability to continue fighting for our missions. We do have some ideas, and so you'll see some information here on the side of some scenarios of what could happen related to the economic impact, specifically in the US, around COVID-19. And one of the good things I look towards when I look at this is that the 4 most probable scenarios, the A, 3, 4, and 1, 2, all show an economic rebound. They all show us getting through this in one stage or another. And it's important, I think, to remember that. We can also look around for some answers in the world. And one of the people I always look to when I'm looking for answers around, especially online giving and the effects of economic downturns to our nonprofits, is Steve McLaughlin, who's from Blackball and the author of Data-Driven Nonprofits, and what he's shared about past economic downturns and the effects of online giving. And the biggest thing that we've learned from past economic downturns, especially the 2009 recession, which we see here on the right, is that financial giving was able to survive through this process and was able to actually, over the long term, nonprofits were able to get that money and keep that, maintaining those donor relationships with donors they already had relationships with. Individual new giving, or the ability to acquire new donors, especially during the recession, was what hampered most nonprofits' ability to continue being successful. So those that actually had existing strong donor relationships were able to do better in the long term. And I share this just to show that, like, we as nonprofits can think about this and how we're going to actually be working with our donors and our supporters to keep them engaged. We also know that user behavior is changing. And this is true of our constituents and our users, but I often think our staff might also be very similar. And so there might be some things we can learn here. This is not necessarily true universally, but something that I've already noticed, as you see here on the graph on the right, is that different websites of different nonprofits that we have access to are experiencing different changes in the last couple of weeks in how users interact with their websites as well as their social media accounts. We're seeing a slight difference here in, actually a pretty drastic difference on a few different organizations on the number of visits that some of the websites are getting on Mondays, but especially Sundays. So typically, a lot of our organizations, depending on our issue and our audiences, would see traffic come Monday through Friday, often while we're producing content, while we're promoting and marketing things, and while people we may be trying to reach are also often online. With more of us online more often now, I think some of these user behaviors are changing slightly. And so there was actually a new report by Social Bakers that just came out this morning showing that more people are on social media like Facebook and Instagram and even TikTok than they usually are. And they're online later than they usually are. And that's both starting later in the day, but also staying later in the evenings, particularly on Facebook. So this is going to be different for all of us, but there are some things that we can do, like looking into our Google Analytics and our social media insights to understand how our constituents are feeling and using and interacting with our work. And that might change how we decide to communicate with them. And then also we can look to medical and economic experts for some long-term ideas about how we can strategically think about getting through this. I think a lot of the problems that some of us are facing right now is that we're living in uncertainty. We're not sure what's happening next. We're seeing federal guidelines or state policies either slowly being enacted or with dates coming and going and being extended and postponed. So I put together some dates that are out there to help give us a sense of what's happening. And first and foremost, the federal government advises that distancing is going to take place, physical distancing throughout the US is going to take place through at least the end of April. The CDC already recommends that no large events of 50 people or more, or 10 or more people of anybody of communities of compromised immune system folks can take place anytime before May 10th. All events over 50 people or 10 people or more of certain communities must be banned through at least May 10th around the entire country. Sorry, it's a guideline, not a ban, but shouldn't happen across the country. And I also look at the entertainment and events industry, which frankly is canceling and postponing all events throughout the summer and often throughout the fall. They're either postponing them until late fall, August at the earliest, or they're actually, a lot of them are looking towards early next year, just because of the uncertainty around the fall right now. We also know that based on those different scenarios of how this pandemic plays out, that we might see some summer loosening or softening of some of the restrictions and guidelines around physical distancing. We'll probably see guidelines throughout the summer that will prevent large group events from happening, but we might see smaller group events start to be able to happen again with certain precautions being put in place over the summer. So I share this with to help give some concepts of how we should be thinking long-term and planning, both with our team members, but also with our programs and our constituents, that this is not going to go away quickly. This is something we're going to be dealing with for a while, and we should plan accordingly. That research that I was pointing to in the very beginning, this goes back to that. And so looking at advertising research during a pandemic, you can see on the graph on the bottom that the majority of constituents who answered these questions wanted to hear from brands. They do want to hear for different reasons, and they want to hear different things. Some of them want to hear from brands because they don't want to think about what's going on right now and they want a little distraction. Some of them just want to feel a sense of normalcy in their lives. Others still need things or still want to know what's going on in the world. And when you look on the right-hand side, this graph is actually an answer to a question of what do people want to feel from brand advertising and messaging. And you'll see that the research study here grouped them by sentiment, and we'll see that security and positivity were two concepts and values that people wanted to hear from in all of their messaging and advertising from different brands. Now, this is definitely about communications and marketing largely, but I think there are lessons we can also take from this ourselves. I don't think there's a person I've talked to yet in the last 3 weeks who doesn't want to hear more positivity and security in their lives. And that's probably going to be true of our staff as well. And then with that, one more from Beth Cantor, who recently shared on Facebook these zones of response to crisis. And In particular, Beth was asking us to think through how we want to respond as humans to the crisis that's going around us, and to think through what zone we might be in, the fear zone, learning zone, or growth zone, by the responses we provide and how we act in this moment. But there's a few things that I loved about this. One, I totally saw myself in this graph when I saw this and was reading through the examples. But it was also a reminder that even as some of us are finding ourselves in that growth zone and able to find more purpose in our work and able to focus a bit more, that growth zone still encompasses the fear zone. There are still moments of fear and anxiety and folks being scared and nervous. And there's still learning to be done. We're all still learning, obviously. And so I found this very helpful, and it's something that I've actually brought to my team, and we kind of discussed and used it as a tool to allow people to kind of talk through and think through some of the emotions that they're feeling right now.
And can you go back to that for a
Yeah.
second, Chris? Yeah. What I'd add to this also to kind of hint at some of the things that we hope to talk about is, when we're talking about managing remote teams, communicating with remote teams, and helping those individuals that are working from home. You can't avoid, but think about this as really a bit of a leadership conversation. And so, as one of the critical roles as leaders, as people trying to guide others and work with others and collaborate with others, is to model. So I think in particular, like looking at that growth zone and some of the things here really gives us a little bit of a framework of some things to think about as we're trying to model ways to communicate online with each other. Simple things like showing gratefulness, to be able to showcase a degree of calmness and patience. But then, as Chris is saying, with the overlap of things, we're all human. We're all feeling some fear. We're all learning a bit as we're going through this. Again, I've been working with remote teams for quite a long time, but I could tell you these past few weeks have been drastically different. So if I was not engaged in the learning zone as well, I'd be making more mistakes than I might already be making. So, so there's some good stuff in here to kind of come back to and reference as you're kind of, reflecting on how you might be interacting with different people online.
There is, and David was just mentioning, it's true, it's funny, in the chat room that actually you may have mentioned this just to the panelists, so not everybody sees it, but David was sharing that when Beth posted this on Facebook, I responded with a photo that looked like this and said, "This is my version and how I'm feeling." And I'm being partially silly, but it's also true. I mean, I've had that moment. I'm going back and forth in this. So I totally agree with you. I've also looked at the growth zone as that area of like, okay, there's some things I can also do to focus who I want to be and how I want to respond in this, while also being understanding of the other feelings I'm having. Oh, let's move on here. If I can get out of annotation mode. There we go. So let's talk a little bit about working, but also especially managing a team and projects and collaboration from home.
Right on. So yeah, so earlier this week, Chris actually did a retweet that someone had shared this quote. Unfortunately, he didn't give attribution to where it came from, but I resonated with it immediately as Chris did about our current times. And, I've seen a lot of people mention this, and I think it's important for all of us to keep in mind that working from home today is not typical working from home, even for those who have been working from home or remote locations for years and years and years. We're all people at home during a crisis, trying to still find a way to be productive. And as such, I feel it's important to keep in mind, because there's tons of information out there about working from home. A lot of it being presented now, in particular for individuals, like how to set up their space and, structuring, scheduling themselves. But while useful, I also think it's important to kind of have a little bit of a beginner's mind at this time, and to make sure that you're kind of looking at everything as it is right now, and not necessarily as others maybe have shared it should be or could be, because the context of how we're all working is drastically different. So, there's some considerations that, Chris and I have been chatting about a little bit, and some that, he was outlining a bit in some of those initial slides, just kind of, thinking about, what is impacting us right now when we're working from home. And, health is impacting us. Access is impacting us. Technology, both new and existing tools, and then process. How are we interacting with each other? And so, even just talking about each just for a moment, like the health side of things, mental health, physical health, managing those spectrums of emotions that we're all going through. It's ever present. The way I've been describing it to colleagues, how I feel, and others have been, kind of validating that they have something similar. Is there's just there's an undercurrent of unease that we're all feeling, of stress, anxiety, panic, that at various times, frankly, during the day, I feel like you get closer to that river unease, and sometimes drift away and are going in and out, and that completely is impacting how I'm working and how I see at least some of my teammates are vacillating throughout the day. And from day to day. Access in terms of, just some basics of just our internet connections. At least in my home, my daughter's on Zoom 3 or 4 times a week doing remote schooling. I've never seen my iPad battery go down as quickly as it's going with her working with all the different tools that she's on. My wife working, I'm working, we're seeing issues, some slowdowns and juggling, all impacting, how we're operating. Tech, so many people are using new tools, or trying to use tools that they have in different ways to support. Those are some notable challenges. And then the process, which we'll be talking a bit about, in particular the tech and the process that we'll be chatting about. So I think looking at some of the tech side and the tool side first. So, I think there's so many different tools out there. And again, we want to get into more of the tips and the strategies, but both Chris and I felt it was just important to provide a little bit of context. So, we'll be talking a lot about team chat and video chat. So, on the team chat side of things, Slack, Microsoft Teams, very, very similar solutions for team communication. Basecamp, if you're using Basecamp for project management, has a built-in team chat solution that's in there for both group chat as well as direct messages to individuals. Skype, another common one. Again, for context in terms of maybe specific questions that come up or from specific experiences. My team chat tool of choice is Slack, something that we've been using for a number of years in different capacities. We have used a few others. HipChat was another one, a little bit more on the technology dev side in terms of folks that use that, but a very similar offering. And Chris, did you have a chat particular solution that you're using, or not so much?
We use Google Chat. Yeah, I didn't put my number one there. We use Google Chat primarily because we're a Google G Suite outfit agency. That's what we use for everything. And so it's built right in and really easy to do. We can see when each other are online. And so actually just talking a little bit about this, I think this is actually, when we're creating this, and as you just said, in one way, some of these tools are already out there. You probably have heard of them. But it's important to talk about this because I think this is one of the things I've gotten the most feedback from my team on. We've always used these tools to try to keep up with each other and stay in touch, but we are chatting more than we ever have in the recent weeks. We're also having video meetings more than we usually do, and we'll talk about that as well. But I'm finding that it's chatting both to stay on top of our projects and our work, but it's also chatting just to stay in touch with other humans and to socialize with our colleagues. and to feel like we're as normal as we can be during these times. So I find that chat has a lot of benefit right now. And to your point, Seth, I think it's just probably important to always reinforce this, that we are not encouraging that you go out and install all these things right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you already are using Google Suite or Google Apps in your organization as your official email and document management system, then it would probably make sense, if you don't already have a chat solution, to use Google Chat that's already built in and already probably turned on or could easily be turned on.
Yeah.
And if you have another chat solution that's been installed or has maybe been used but not prioritized, which I find is usually the situation in most organizations, maybe now's the time to lean in a little bit and to let that become that official chat channel that you want your staff to use. So Seth, I'm combining names here. Lou in the chat room had a question that I want to throw to you of how do we minimize the amount of non-work related chatting between staff?
It's interesting. I'm going to share a couple of things about that. One, it's not something that I have found personally to be a large issue. So just to put that out there in terms of context of my personal experience. I actually have found sometimes that I had to do the opposite, which was encourage it. Sometimes, to try and build team and to try and build community, to let people converse. I think, in these times, my general response is I don't have a concern about it. And I'm not so sure so many of you should have that either. I don't necessarily, I guess my point is I don't want to necessarily judge productivity based upon, how much someone might be chatting or not chatting within our team chat solution. Certainly if I saw a lack of productivity in a way that, might bring some things into question, I might have a conversation and explore whether or not that is something might related to chat and that might be a symptom or connection to that lack of productivity. But otherwise, I feel like the more your team is connecting and interacting and balancing, social from work, I find that to be quite healthy overall. I don't know, Chris, if you have a different experience or take on that.
I largely agree. I think I'm going back to those feelings that we know people are all feeling right now and wanting to hear from each other and brands in particular, but likely in our lives in general, positivity and security, is I think socialization in the work environment can provide some of that. The normalcy that provides security, or at least an illusion of it, and the positivity that we do get from socializing with our peers, especially hearing good things in this current environment. But Lou, I also can understand that there could be concern around that. I mean, obviously, we're also trying to think about how to manage teams and, like Seth was talking about, manage productivity.
Yeah.
And so I'd say if you've seen an issue with it, then maybe it's something to work on. And some solutions that I actually saw somebody mention, I think in the chat room, which I have seen others do, is like, so one org I'm with, they use Slack. And so they'll have one Slack, is it called a channel or something?
Yes.
That will just be for social.
I was going to mention that too. Yeah.
We had an email list at our old organization that was community and it was the non-work related email list that staff could choose whether or not to be subscribed to. And that way we could ask for social mass emails not to be blasted out to the organization, but to basically put on a community board. And so I don't know if there was I saw other people commenting as well, which I really appreciate. Thank you all for sharing all that feedback.
Yeah. I want to call out one or two of those. There was, Michelle, you were sharing, kind of similar, I think, to what Chris is kind of sharing, is kind of structuring a little bit of that opportunity for social interaction, either having scheduled times, which I believe was what you were suggesting, that these are more, social hour, on through your tools to get together, to, what Chris was sharing, which is something that I have done, which was, have we used to call it a water cooler channel. So you'd have the one channel in Slack, one area that, folks can go in there and just, we try to encourage them to, share pictures of family, share different things that are going on, you know, just to be a little more social with the team and converse.
And so I'm also just sharing it here. Reminder to all of us that those who are going to be watching the recording in the future, or reminder for Seth and I, that those watching this in the future can't see the chat room. So I'd like to read out anything specifically mentioned. And so Joshua Pesky was saying that in Slack, it's #random is the Slack channel that's often used for non-work related stuff. I am not a Slack fan myself, so I did not know that. Thank you, Joshua, for teaching us. Was there anything else in there, Seth, you wanted to talk about before we move on?
I don't think so. I mean, some Joshua also shared a link to resources. So again, if that's not available, does that show up to everyone, or is that something we could just share forward later?
It shows here, and we'll look at seeing if we can add it to the resource list at the end later. So thank you for that, Joshua.
Yeah.
Awesome. So talking through video as well real quick, I actually asked my team some questions about working and collaborating remote in preparation for this session. And one of the things I asked them was, what do they like that we're doing? What are we doing well that's actually helping them, especially during this new time? And what are the things we could be doing better? And one of the things that we actually adapted to probably about 3 weeks ago is instead of having, I was having more separate one-on-ones with different team members, and usually like one team meeting every other week or so. And it would usually be a long meeting, and it was a lot of long-term planning and whatnot. And we've shifted that and changed that. And we're now having shorter, quick video meetings now 2 or 3 times a week. Often in the beginning of the week, and sometimes usually midweek, and sometimes even again if a lot's going on. And we're doing it really just to keep up with each other and all the things that are going on right now, because everything's shifting and we're having to pivot our work and change and adapt, and there's a lot to think through and talk about. But my team actually was telling me that they found it incredibly helpful because it helped them connect with each other. Even though they've always worked alone from home, now they're seeking that connection even more so than they had in the past. I'm wondering for you, how you are using video chat, Seth?
Yeah, we use video chat a couple ways. We do a team meeting on a weekly basis generally. I will admit the past few weeks it's been a little challenged with our team meeting, though it's something that my co-principal and I were talking about, kind of taking a deep breath and getting that back in there for us. But it's we use it daily in terms of just, you know, it kind of relates to sometimes how a conversation might start in a larger thread, in a larger context, and then might merit, you know, kind of, you know, becoming a little bit more of a one-to-one, or, you know, or a small group conversation. And depending on the context, what we like to be able to do is just, you know, kind of on the fly decide, is this a chat conversation or is this a video conversation? And more often than not, it's a video conversation. And so, you know, jumping right into, you know, with Slack, depending if you're a paid user or a free user, if you're a free user, you can jump into a one-on-one video right through Slack very, very quickly, which is nice in that tool context. But more often than not, we use Google Meet quite a bit because we're also G Suite users, and you know, so we'll start up a meet and you know, get people in, and again, because of how quickly you can get these things up and running, it's perfect for just kind of that more ad hoc connection and being able to see each other and, you know, and be a little more human and work through whatever you're working through or touch base about things.
Absolutely. And you did put Zoom was my number one. And that's primarily because we're having group meetings via video here. We use Google Meet as well, or Google Hangouts. I think we're still in the older version for our one-on-one video chats as well. I've actually found all of them incredibly helpful. It's this whole process of how what we're going through right now is changing us. I find so interesting, and changing us in the way we use technology, to rely on it, to communicate with each other, in that over the last year, I would always insist and default to every single meeting I would have would be a video chat with Zoom. If you schedule an appointment with me on my website, if you hire me for consulting, if we're doing one-on-one training, whatever it is, I always ask for a Zoom call. And I would find that a lot of people would be a little bit hesitant. They would either didn't have the tech set up, or they just didn't like being on video. A lot of us don't like being on video. And that seems to have changed drastically in the last 3 weeks. I'm not hearing that anymore. In fact, I'm having people ask me now, can we have a video chat? So I think that this is all going to change us. Like how we're using these tools are going to change the way we work together long term. And with that, I also had to add one more that my team member, Jose, actually wanted me to add because he uses it the most. We do use these official tools, but I've also adapted to try to work with my team based on their needs and what they prefer. And this isn't always possible depending on what type of content you might be talking about. If you work in healthcare and you're talking about patient records and other stuff, you need to keep things locked down under work chat channels where they can be secure. But one of my team members, Jose, actually loves to text message. It's just his preference. And I don't mind. I did it first. It took me a while. But we've adapted and we've gotten to this place that we often now text message a little bit more than chat. We've set each of our boundaries. He knows that I'm not going to always be able to respond via text message depending on what I'm doing, where a lot of us may see a text as being something that needs a more urgent response. And he also knows what hours of each day that I'm mostly going to be available. And so because of that, I found that he actually will text me when it is something he needs a more quick response on. And he'll now email me when it's something that isn't so priority or important. But he largely bypasses the chat systems, just not his preference. And so that's okay. I've actually found it makes us both more productive because it's a way for us to talk with each other. Should we move on to the next slide, Seth?
Yeah, please do.
So this is actually, I think, yours.
Yeah, just in case folks aren't as familiar with Slack, just sharing. And again, yeah, you can see in that channel side, just, one of the nice things about Microsoft Teams does this, Slack does this, HipChat, a lot of group chat tools allow, Discord, allow for a way for you to kind of create separate channels or separate groups that both people can be members of. So you could have groups with, smaller groups of your team that have access to a certain area versus the whole team. To just having different places to set context for conversations. So just giving you a sense of that, and it just kind of brings to life some of the different features of these solutions that we'll chat about in terms of the tips. So we can move on from here, though I might come back to it.
Of course.
As we're going, and I want to be sensitive to time too, because I do want to get to a lot of our tips and so on. So I don't know if we want to spend too much time on this side of things. But certainly there's communication that's happening within your remote teams through your project tools and collaboration tools beyond chat and beyond video. And that's what we're acknowledging here, that having some way to, whether it's through Docs, Word. I've become a big fan of a tool called Notion over the past 6 months, and being able to document ideas, talk about ideas, and comment around them, as well as our project management tools and their communication features to help keep people on the same page and connected.
I think the only thing
part of the overall tech, part of the overall tech solution in terms of working remotely with teams.
I think the only thing I was going to say about this was so many organizations I work with have these tools already, but aren't actually using them to their fullest. Yeah. And so I think especially right now where a lot of us are, not a lot of us, we're all working remotely. Google Docs, Microsoft Office 365, if you already have it installed, especially Office 365, now's the time to get out of having multiple versions of Word documents emailed around to each other and start using the cloud collaboration tools that will allow multiple people to edit the same document at once and maintain a revision history so you won't lose anything. So again, we're not asking you to go install new things, but use the functionality that might already exist that we maybe don't know about yet. And then in project task management tool, we use Rike, which we find is a really great project management tool. It is very complex and not something I would advise somebody to set up if you are just trying to find something to get you by or to start using. Asana or even just spreadsheets can be really the easy way to get everybody on the same page. And we'll often do this when, especially if there's something urgent coming up that we just have to respond to, is we'll even start in a spreadsheet and just knock out a punch list of the things we got to do. And then we'll upload it to our Rike project management tool so we can keep track of it. But certainly we could have done that right in the spreadsheet. So you already have some of these tools available to you. And then with that, we can move on to some tips.
Yeah. So again, I actually might jump around a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you know, so it might not go in order. I feel like one of the things that I've learned over the years is how disruptive all these communications can be, and how challenging it is to find a management style and a communication culture through these different tools that makes everyone happy and productive. So what I mean is I am a particular type of manager. The type of work that we're doing, the number of projects that we're juggling, there's a lot happening every day. I like to know, you know, I'm in charge of kind of keeping track of all of that. So it's important for me to have updates. And I found at different times, at different points when the communication wasn't flowing naturally between teammates and me, that, you know, I'm often, you know, reaching out and pinging, you know, and if you think about all the different tools we have, where do you ping from? You could ping and at somebody through your team chat. I could send a video. I could just schedule a calendar invite to schedule a meeting. I could, you know, comments through the Google Doc or, you know, through Basecamp or through Asana. So many different ways that I could come at everybody. And so, you know, what I ultimately have found is, you know, trying to talk to my team, work that out, try to work out an understanding of communication that is hopefully less disruptive, so that we know when to ping each other and when maybe we don't need to ping each other. And some suggestions that came out of that and some practices that we have employed is, for example, in our team chat, we have a stand-up channel. And so every morning, every team member will go into that stand-up channel and make a post and share what she or he is focusing on for the day, what they believe their priorities are for that day. And what's kind of interestingly happened natural is some of my teammates have actually used that almost as a to-do list. So as they're going through the day, they're going back to that post and they've been using the little checkbox emoji and adding a checkbox emoji between, you know, replacing the bullet for each of those items of Slack. Not something I asked for, just something that they start doing, which is wonderful. And what I like about that is that gives me a place to go and look and see what everybody has in mind that they're taking ownership for, that they feel that they're going to be working on, and gives me the opportunity to say nothing, in a sense, at the morning. You know, say, okay, you're on top of it. You got the things that you know you need to be covering, and you're good to go. Or, you know, if something's changed, you know, we have to make an adjustment. It gives me the opportunity to then, you know, respond to that post and reach out to that person and say, oh, hold on, there's some changes in what's most important in priorities. Let's get this, you know, let's work through this. Or that's something that I know I wanted to talk to you about before you got started. So, you know, let's set up a little time and have a conversation. Similar to that is, in addition to kind of having that stand-up checklist during the course of the day, my teammates, we all kind of post little tiny micro updates in our main channel. What are you working on now? What did you finish? You know, I'm taking lunch. I'll be right back. I'm taking a break. I'm going to go for a quick workout. You know, whatever that little update is, you know, so some of it just practical in terms of, you know, where they are, whether they're online, offline type things, and others related to project work. I'm stuck on something. I'm really struggling with something, and trying to, again, make it that there's potential for less meetings to happen, but more information flowing. And one of the things I love about that is then everybody on the team, again, depending on your team size, you know, my team size is small, and I admit that, but depending on your team size, you get everyone gets a nice pulse of what other people are doing within your team. And if you have larger teams, again, that's where having maybe different channels for each of your team can make them feel smaller, but still kind of have, that kind of ongoing updates. And again, those little updates make it that it is less need for others to disrupt someone else unnecessarily. We can get a pulse of what something's happening. And when you don't hear from someone for a while, maybe then that also can set up a flag as a manager, maybe something's not right, and then you could, maybe send a direct message to that person. And, so the collection of things in there that I thought might be helpful to share that we do. And then the other big one that I want to make sure that we were talking about, especially given that initial quotation that, working from home now is not normal, and the way people are operating is not normal. One of the things that I have been thinking a lot about and practicing and trying is how do we support each other in these times as humans? What are some things we've already been doing and maybe should just be doing it more if we have, make sure it continues? What are some things that maybe need to change? Some simple things that we do that I think, are easy, fun to do is, I love emojis in these chat platforms, that you could post a thumbs up, you could post a heart, anything in reaction to something, like your Facebook like liking a tweet. But there's creativity to them in the wide variety of emojis that you can share. And just making sure that we're making small little connections like that as people are posting their updates and as things are going. Someone just completed something, try to follow up and make sure there's at least a thumbs up or, or a heart or a ta-da or something, just to kind of give that little pat on the back without it being, super disruptive. And again, that could become viral amongst your team of everybody sharing a little bit of love that way. Of course, as writing something too is wonderful, great job, that sounds awesome, I can't wait to check it out, kinds of things. But, lots of different ways to make that connection. But there's something that I know Chris and I have been chatting about too, is just, how are we communicating around our present circumstance with each other, acknowledging that, even for seasoned people working from home and working remotely, people are struggling with focus. People are, struggling with, their productivity and keeping focused. They have, our kids that are home and we're playing the role of assistant teacher and working at the same time. We're, worried about family and loved ones, persistently, bombarded by news and, and as much as you try to stay away from it, for those of us who need to be on social for different reasons, you can't avoid some of that. It's ever present. And I noticed in the first week, I was reaching out to everybody and, checking in, how are you? What's happening? And using chat to do that. Sometimes also sharing publicly about, how I was feeling, and, thinking about that the bubbles of Beth Cantor, and how do we model trying to create a safe space, for everybody to feel comfortable sharing how they're feeling. I feel like as leaders, as managers, I think that's important to do to some extent. We certainly want to show positivity and show, that we're moving forward and able to keep on and be motivating in that way. But at least in my personal opinion, I feel like also being human ourselves is part of that. Making sure that, some of our concerns, our vulnerability is shared so that others will at least, make it feel that it's safe if they want to share that. And so as a result of that, there was a lot of direct dialogue, where we moved from maybe a public chat to a direct message or a video, checking in and sharing how we're dealing with things and talking about it. But after that first week, I've been, really trying to be a little more careful with some feedback from team members and my co-principal about just being careful that we're not also putting what's happening in everybody's face when they don't need it to be. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but in the sense of like, I'm not digging, I'm not trying to encourage you to go to maybe that unhappy place if you're not really there right now. And so to me, those are, with that in mind, one of the challenges of working remote and working in this environment where you may not hear someone's tone if you're not talking to them. If they're just chatting, you don't have cues like tone, you don't have body language necessarily. So trying to find ways to get to know each other through this textual interface often is a very unique thing to do, and something that as managers we have to really be very mindful of. What are the new cues that that our teammates exhibit that might show that they are stressed, and hopefully they'll take the invitation of the safe space to maybe come out and share it, but some may not, and they still might need a little bit of love and support to help them either say it's okay to take a break, or okay, help them work through a particular work challenge that they might be having. But looking for those cues. And as I shared earlier, like having those regular updates that everybody's giving. If I don't see an update from someone who's usually verbose, that's a cue. And so, trying to balance creating a little bit of a culture and a process to how you're communicating, and then trying to learn from that to assess what it might mean for, different people at different times when they're maybe not their self, and then being able to reach out to them directly and, saying, hey, how's it going? Is there anything I can do to help you with? Are you stuck? What might be happening? And I've been seeing as, over these past weeks, especially for people who are used to working from home, it's very frustrating. They're good at this often. And now all of a sudden, they're not so good at it, and for myself, I'm usually an amazing multitasker. I stink these past 2 weeks. I was sharing this yesterday and was feeling it this morning. It's like every little thing, I feel like I could really only do one, maybe two things. And I'm absorbed and distracted. I can't get to juggling multiple. And so we're all kind of trying to figure out how to still do good and move forward, and get absorbed in what we're doing and push our missions forward. But it's extremely challenging. And so working in this text environment and these video environments remotely, we have to really work hard to change how we see each other, and get to know each other so we could be responsive to each other.
Absolutely. I sure wanted to add to that I think the human side of this that you mentioned here, being the human side of management being really important right now, that part of our conversation and that part about how we have to be careful about how we introduce this topic over and over when asking people to share their feelings, and whether or not we might actually be triggering those moments or making things worse at times, or making people focus on feelings when they want to actually focus on work, was really helpful for me. So I actually appreciated that part of the conversation. It also got me thinking a lot about my team, in that so when I started my new agency last year, I wanted to start an agency and a place of work where I didn't feel overwhelmed all the time, where I could make my own hours. And for me, I've always been somebody who doesn't work normal 9 to 5 hours. It's part of the reason I would often be burnt out from old jobs, is because I would often work before work or after work or on the weekends, and then still have to work a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job as well. And so one of the things I've tried to do with my new agency, and I didn't actually see it come into play much with my team, just for me, until this last month, was the ability for my team to be able to work hours that suit them. And so we do, and what that means is that week to week, we let each other know when we're going to be available, when we're planning to get things done by, so we're keeping everybody up to date. But we're also being open with each other in that I need this morning for myself. I need some time, and I just can't focus right now. And this is not my productive time. For me personally, I really know that my productive time is from 6 to 9 a.m. It's when I wake up, and it's my first 3 hours in the day before the world wakes up and starts emailing and calling. And I have been working to find that like allowing us to be human, and understanding that people are using, just like people are using internet and social differently, we also may need to work differently. than we have. We're not going to work a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 job the exact way we used to, not in this environment. So I know we're getting closer to time here. So just real quick, if you had any questions that we didn't get to answer, go ahead and jump them or drop them in the chat room or the Q&A box. Seth, if it's okay with you, I'd love to run through some of the resources we have just to wrap this up for people who might have to jump off. But then we'll make sure to hang on that last slide and answer any questions that you may have. So of course you are going to get a recording of this. We are going to send out the slides so you'll be able to get everything that we've shared. And there's also a lot of other great resources available right now. We've linked some of them here. I'm not going to go through them all here since we're going to send you these links. Joshua, I think I saw in the chat room, you also have a webinar coming up, Suddenly Remote from Roundtable Technology. I'll try to drop that in the slides before we send it out as well. And Seth, do you want to talk about Mod Live real quick?
Yeah, I mean, just highlighting, you know, what I shared at the outset. You know, we partner with a variety of nonprofits, foundations, social good companies, helping them from working on, you know, corporate organizational collateral to event materials to websites and web applications, helping make sure that their brand is extended and activated across both print and web. And, you know, I'll just add specific tools that we work with. If anyone has any questions and wants to reach out on social or via email with questions about, in my case, using Slack or Asana or Google Hangouts, you know, I'm happy to try and answer any questions and dialogue about that with you.
Awesome. And then one of the resources that Tuttle Co. is launching at the end of this week now is everydaynonprofits.com. So we've just actually had a couple weeks of multiple webinars back to back. We have a couple more coming up, including one next week, which I'll mention in a second. And so to help provide all these resources, as well as a bunch of templates and toolkits that I've made over the years, things like a Facebook fundraiser analyzer that'll help you understand who your best Facebook fundraisers are. I'm giving it all away for free. And so with a free membership to Everyday Nonprofits, you'll be able to access all of these webinars, recordings, and some free resources. We're also going to have a low-cost premium membership where we're going to be developing 16 classes, one monthly and one quarterly. As well, at minimum, we'll have others as well that we're going to be helping you all through the next year figure out how to do everything digital better, including in this new environment. So we'll walk through developing a new digital strategy, developing campaigns for fundraising and acquisition and marketing throughout this, and helping you understand everything from Facebook Live to Zoom webinars like this. We'll be launching that this weekend, and I'll be emailing out by early next week to all of you, both invites as well as a special discount code. Some of those webinars we've already recorded appear here on the right, and the one webinar that we've actually had to postpone until next week is with Kishana Palmer. So if you didn't register for this already, it was originally going to be yesterday, but we postponed it due to just some illness, unfortunately. But Kish is doing better and is getting better and does want to do the session. So we're going to be on next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's Trust During Crisis. So how do we continue building trust with our colleagues during this time when we're not with each other day to day? And our contact information is here, like Seth said. Get in touch with us. We're both happy to answer questions. And with that, I don't see any additional questions in the chat room. But Seth, any final thoughts we can close out with from your end?
No, just keep sharing love, everybody.
That's a beautiful final thought. We all could use a little bit more love right now. So I hope to see y'all back online again in another webinar and hopefully in person soon again too. Take care of yourselves. Thank you. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Cami. Thank you, Gabriel. Great, Gabriella.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.